Here are the facilitators for this training: Chief Barbara Lark, Chief of Security, and myself, Fred Wagstaff, Executive Director of Safety and Security. The agenda that we'll be discussing today: District School Safety Plan, Safety Protocols, Active Shooter Incident, ICS 100 course, Communication when BPD is involved, Policies and Procedures. Building level emergency response plan, multidisciplinary threat assessment team. The building level emergency response team appointed by the building principal and BPS security in accordance with guidelines presented by the Board of Education and includes, but not limited to, representatives of teachers, administrators, parents, school safety personnel, teacher aides, guidance counselors and coaches, mental health professionals, local law enforcement officials or SROs, fire officials, other emergency response agencies, other representatives of the Board of Education. The Buffalo Public Schools Security Department will work with the multidisciplinary threat assessment teams to assist with coordinating drills, role playing scenarios, and debriefings. Teams need to have a specifically designated leader, usually the senior administrator within the school. Teams should establish protocols and procedures that are followed for each assessment, including who will interview the student of concern, who will talk to classmates, teachers, or parents, and who will be responsible for documenting the team's efforts. Teams should meet whenever a concerning student or situation has been brought to their attention, but they should also meet on a regular basis to engage in discussions and role-playing scenarios. Debrief meetings should take place after role-playing scenarios and drills with BPS security, law enforcement officials, and fire officials present in order to talk through the areas that need improvement. BPS Security will work with Student Support Services and the Office of School Leadership to review and enhance the central reporting mechanism. Schools can establish one or more reporting mechanisms such as an online form posted on the school website, a dedicated email address or phone number, smartphone application platforms, or another mechanism that is accessible for a particular school community. BPS Security Department will work with school administrators, the school support team, which consists of guidance counselors, social workers, and school psychologists, and law enforcement, SROs, to provide training and guidance for students, teachers, staff, and parents on recognizing behaviors of concern, their roles and responsibilities in reporting these behaviors, and how to report the information. Reports regarding student behaviors involving weapons, threats of violence, physical violence, or concerns about an individual's safety should be immediately reported to local law enforcement. The Buffalo Public School Security Department is exploring communication software to be used to inform Buffalo Public School personnel of a safety posture drill or critical incident that is currently taking place. This is necessary to prevent BPS personnel from going into a school building while a safety posture is in progress. Buffalo Public Schools Security Department is exploring a visitors management system that will scan and print visitors' ID. The Buffalo Public Schools Security Department continues to research the best practices of other school districts throughout the country. This includes updating the two-way radios and repeaters throughout the district. There will also be new static mats that will be utilized when wanding as necessary. All handheld wands have been updated as well. We are also working with COO David Hills in order to determine our best options for upgrading building security. Safety protocols. Knowledge of the safety protocols and participating in the following safety drills are mandated by New York State Education Department. Shelter in place, lockout, lockdown, as well as fire drills. Shelter in place. An announcement will be made that a shelter in place is in effect due to a weather-related issue, a non-specific bomb threat, or an emergency that requires the building operations to pause. 911 may need to be called due to the situation. Students should report or remain in their regular scheduled class. Teachers should take attendance and continue with normal classroom activities. Do not remain in a lavatory. Report back to your classroom. An announcement will be made when the need for a shelter in place has ceased. The shelter in place strip for staff. Staff, please initiate shelter in place procedures. I repeat, initiate your shelter in place procedures. Continue instruction, and we will update you as soon as possible. Lockout. An announcement will be made that a lockout is in effect due to an emergency taking place in the vicinity of the school. Exterior doors and windows should be locked. Outside activities are ended. Classes will continue as usual. The principal will announce an end to the lockout when he or she receives notification from the Buffalo Police Department or Buffalo Public School District office. The strip for staff for a lockout. Staff, please initiate lockout procedures. I repeat, initiate your lockout procedures. Continue instruction, and we will update you as soon as possible. There is a strip for lockout for the families and caregivers. And it goes as parents and caregivers. This is Principal A. We have initiated lockout procedures. All building operations will continue as usual. Because of activity outside of the school, no one will be allowed to enter the building until the police release the lockout posture. Everyone is safe, instruction continues, and we will update you as soon as possible. Lockdown. An announcement will be made that a lockdown is in effect due to an incident that poses an immediate threat or violence in or around the school. 911 must be called. Once again, 911 must be called. Law enforcement, upon arrival, will take over the situation. Teachers should direct the students to the closest room and remain there. Teachers should lock doors after making sure all students are inside. Teachers should direct students to sit on the floor away from the door and farthest from the windows. Teachers should take attendance if possible. Do not talk. Do not pull down window shades down or block view from outside. Administration or members of law enforcement will make an announcement that the building is clear. All doors will be opened by the principal, assistant principal, or a member of the Buffalo Police Department. The lockdown strip for staff. Staff, immediately initiate lockdown procedures. I repeat, initiate your lockdown procedures immediately. Be advised that law enforcement has been notified. Lockdown strip for families and caregivers. Parents and caregivers. This is District Official A. We have initiated lockdown procedures at your child's school B. All students, faculty, and staff will barricade and remain silent until the police release the lockdown posture. Be advised that law enforcement is engaged. We will update you as soon as possible. Early detection strategies. In the event of a 9/11 emergency, after calling 911, notify via text thread the ASLs, Chief Aaron Young, Lieutenant Kelly Craig, Executive Director of Safety and Security Fred Wagstaff, and Chief of Security Barbara Lark. Safety protocols. The Buffalo Public Schools Security Department will be working with the Buffalo Public Schools HR Department to implement safety protocols for all substitute teachers, temporary and seasonal employees to ensure knowledge of the BPS safety protocols and procedures. All BPS personnel are required to participate in the shelter in place, lockout, and lockdown drills. BPS security will assist school administrators during drills only. In the event of an actual active shooter or critical incident, BPS security will follow lockdown protocols along with school personnel and students and await Buffalo Police Department to arrive. There are 10 essential actions for physical and emotional safeties of school. Physical safety, comprehensive school safety assessment and plans, campus, building, and classroom security, coordination with first responders, school-based law enforcement, drills, emotional safety, school climate, which includes code of conduct, anonymous reporting systems, behavior threat assessment and management, mental health resources, and social media monitoring. Eval scanners. The eval scanners are being implemented in 3 phases in the Buffalo Public School District. Phase 1, high schools, middle schools, and central registration. Phase 2, elementary schools. Phase 3, continuation of elementary schools. Phase 1 and 2 have been completed as of the end of June. Phase 3 will begin over the summer for the remaining elementary schools. Security officers are assigned to schools with eval scanners as follows. High schools. The number of security officers at the high schools vary depending on the population of the school. Middle schools. Minimum 1 security officer. Elementary schools, 1 security officer at arrival for the operation of the eval system. Central registration, 1 to 2 security officers. City Hall Superintendent's Office, we plan to add 1 security officer. Code of Conduct, Vignette 1. Student A is a student at Buffalo Public Schools Harvard Cup High School. He is upset that student B rejected his invitation to accompany him to the senior prom. Student A goes on social media and states that the Harvard Cup High School is going to be blown up. In this scenario, the code of conduct violation was number 5. The level of response 4 and 5, and the appropriate consequence is a possible arrest by law enforcement and long-term suspension. Code of conduct vignette number 2. Buffalo Public Schools Yale Cup Elementary School student C over time has been repeatedly bullying student D, causing student D to miss school because of the physical threats that have been unbeknownst to school staff until parents reported after 2 months. The code of conduct violation here is number 6. The level of response from the school will be number 2, 3, 4, and 5. The appropriate consequences will be a long-term suspension by the school and referred to local law enforcement. Code of conduct vignette number 3. Student E, who attends BPS Columbia Cup Elementary School, has a fight on a yellow bus ride home with student F. Student E's parent meet the bus at student E's bus stop and storm onto the bus, causing injury to the bus aide, who prevents the parent from getting to student F, who was fighting student E. The code of conduct violations here is number 4. The level of response by the BPS school district will be 2, 3, 4, and 5. The appropriate consequences will be as follows. Long-term suspension for the student, and with 911 being called due to the parent's actions, the police will investigate the actions of the parent to determine if the parent faces criminal charges.
Communication when BPD is involved. Administrators are required to call 911 from the school's landline phone when there is an emergency or threat to a student, staff, or building. Administrators may contact BPS Security and/or BPD Chief Young or Lieutenant Kelly for advice on a school matter. Remember, time is of the essence in an emergency situation. 911 should be called immediately to request police services. 911 calls are prioritized based on the level of the emergency call. Lesser priority calls may not be dispatched right away if there are no police officers available at the time the call is made. For example, a fight that takes place and is already over is a lesser priority call than a fight that is in progress involving multiple students and there are signs of visible injuries. This is a higher priority, and that call would require multiple police cars to respond. If you make a 911 call and police have not yet arrived and the situation has escalated, call 911 again and update the 911 call taker of the existing facts. This may result in the 911 call being upgraded to a higher priority. Just to give you a little history regarding the 911 call center, when you call 911, that call goes to a county employee. That person takes the initial information from the caller and then routes that information to a 911 dispatcher. The 911 dispatcher is a Buffalo Police Department employee. That dispatcher then will route that call to whatever available police cars that are available at the moment. And if you have a real serious high priority call in one of our schools, the dispatcher has the authority to take a police officer off of one call and assign them to another if there aren't any available. So that's the priority system. Communication when DPD is involved. Don't make false statements to 911 call taker in order to get the police to arrive faster. This is called falsely reporting and could result in you being arrested. Stick to the facts. Call 911 with updates as often as you feel needed. It is necessary to make the 911 call as opposed to calling Chief Young, Lieutenant Craig, or family member or friend who works for BPD. BPS Security Chief Young and Lieutenant Craig may advise on a matter, but speaking to one of us does not take the place of the 911 call unless you have been advised by one of us that it is not necessary to call 911. When in doubt, err on the side of caution and make the 911 call. It's better to be safe than sorry. Calling 911 generates a complaint number that is necessary for BPS to enter the incident report. If you call 911 for an incident and later find out that the police are not needed, you can always call back and cancel the call. Call 911 for threats, assaults, fights, and any other serious incident should be made from the school landline. The victim or complainant should inform officers on scene if they wish to pursue criminal charges against the offender. If the student is the victim/complainant, please contact the student's parents after police have arrived to determine how they wish to proceed. Security asks that you do this so that we don't have parents come to the school prematurely before police are there and engage in fights with the student or with the parents of the other students that are involved. As I previously stated, the victims will need to decide if he or she will pursue criminal charges against the offender. In order to pursue criminal charges, if the victim is a student, the parents will need to be notified. And just to reiterate, whenever possible, have the parents arrive when police are present to reduce the possibility of a confrontation between parents and offending students or parents. Obviously, you will do everything in your power to separate all involved parties, and you currently do a great job with that. Examples of incidents where 911 should be called: a student that has eloped, threats to a student, staff, or building, an assault that has occurred in school or to and from school, fight in school or on school grounds, inappropriate touching or sexual offenses. Students who are special victims, those are incidents that involve any type of sexual offense. They should only be investigated by the Buffalo Police Department. BPS personnel and staff should not interview the student. You should just gather the information of all involved parties and relay that information to the police upon their arrival. Matters of these types will most likely be referred to the Special Victims Unit. Matters involving CPS. Buffalo Police Department can transport the student to a police district. All 5 police districts are equipped with a child-friendly space and furnished with snacks and materials to entertain younger students if necessary until CPS arrives. Sometimes calling CPS may occur at the end of the school day. School is closing, principals or administrators want to go home. The police officers, their shift may be ending, but someone's at the police station 24/7, so the students can be taken to whatever district that the school is located in, and the officers would have to remain with the student, of course, but until CPS will arrive. This segment covers an active shooter incident. I know many of the administrators and other school personnel watched and took the active shooter training, and some of you have not, so I'll suggest that for those who haven't, we'll go back and take the active shooter training. I did use a lot of the material from that training in this one, but this is not that same training in its entirety, just segments from it. BPS will follow the safety protocols in the event of an active shooter incident. Those protocols are shelter in place, lockout, and lockdown. Be mindful that multiple emergency response personnel will arrive on the scene. It will be chaotic and stressful for all involved. Utilize your building's emergency response team. Scenario-based practice drills with your building's emergency response teams, BPS security, law enforcement, fire, and EMS personnel will be conducted in the 2023-24 school year. You are encouraged to share scenario ideas and suggestions with BPS security at balark@buffaloschools.org. In the event of an active shooter incident, we'll be operating under what's called an incident command structure. That structure is explained in the ICS 100 course. Security officers recently took the ICS 100 course so that they understand what the command system would look like in the event of an emergency situation, such as an active shooter or a very major critical incident. I felt it necessary for administrators to take this course as well, so when multiple police personnel are in your school buildings or on your school grounds, multiple fire personnel, EMS personnel from the entire Western, it could be from the entire Western New York area, you'll understand what's happening. This is something that we may pass along to some others in addition to administrators, but administrators are the best place to start along with security. So in order to take this course, I'm going to ask you to register for ICS 100. You have to create a student ID number. The link is attached, training.fema.gov/IS/. ICS utilizes the unified command system between law enforcement, fire, and other emergency response personnel. An incident commander will be determined once police arrive. However, if an active shooter were to happen at your school, whatever school that is, that administrator would be the incident commander from the start of the incident until police arrive. Active shooter awareness. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of stats about gun violence and school shooting facts. Each day, 12 children die from gun violence in America. Another 32 are shot and injured. Guns are the leading cause of death among American children and teens. 1 out of 10 gun deaths are age 19 or younger. In fact, firearm deaths occur at a rate more than 5 times higher than drownings. Since Columbine in 1999, more than 338,000 students in the U.S. have experienced gun violence at school. There were more school shootings in 2022 than in any year since Columbine. This mirrored America's broader rise in gun violence as it emerged from the pandemic. However, U.S. Department of Homeland Security research shows that if we know the signs of gun violence, we can prevent it and reverse the trend. In 2022, 34 students and adults died, while more than 43,000 children were exposed to gunfire at school. An estimated 4.6 million American children live in a home where at least one gun is kept loaded and unlocked. These improperly stored weapons have contributed to school shootings, suicides, and the deaths of family members, including infants and toddlers. Nearly half of all parents with a weapon in the home wrongly believe their children don't know where a gun is stored. Safe storage of firearms prevents tragedies. In 4 out of 5 school shootings, at least one other person had knowledge of the attacker's plan but failed to report it. In a comprehensive school shooting study, the Secret Service and Department of Education found that 93% of school shooters planned the attack in advance. When people see the signs and get help, we can end school shootings. Almost all mass school shooters shared threatening or concerning messages or images. More than 75% raised concerns from others prior to the attacks. Bystanders saw warning signs in most documented active shooter cases. Truly, you can prevent school shootings when you know the signs. Preparedness and awareness are the keys to helping protect employees, students, visitors, and ourselves. Most active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly, lasting only minutes. We all must prepare to deal with the situation until law enforcement arrives on scene. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined space or other populated area. Common motives include anger, revenge, ideology, and untreated mental illness. There is often no pattern to selection of victims. Active shooters usually will continue to move throughout a building or area until stopped by law enforcement, suicide, or other intervention. Pathway to violence. Ideation begins with an idea to do harm. Planning. Expressing thoughts or fantasies considering the use of violence. Preparation involves preparing for violence and to develop or acquire the means and methods to engage in harm. Implementation moves to carry out the violent plan. Response to active shooter. In an active shooter situation, all involved persons should quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect their own lives. Recommended actions. Run if there's an accessible escape path. Attempt to evacuate the premise. Now let me just elaborate on that a little bit. We teach for lockdown, to go in your classroom and to seek shelter away from doors and windows if possible. What we're saying here is if there is an accessible path out of the building, for example, you see the shooter, go upstairs. If you're in a multi-level building and you have a clear path away from the shooter where you can get your students and yourself out of the building, that may be the best route to go. Hide. If evacuation is not possible, find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you. Lock doors. We encourage and want you to constantly think about, in every room in your school, in every location in your school buildings, every day, from the moment you walk in your school, as you're approaching your school, as you're leaving your school, because this is the world we live in now. We want you to constantly think about, if an active shooter were to come into this school at this moment while I'm in this space, what could I do to protect myself and my students? And you have to think that way now, unfortunately, but this is what we have to do. We have to constantly mentally prepare for a situation in the event a situation happens. As a last resort, fight. As if your life is in imminent danger, because it would be. Attempt to disrupt and or incapacitate the active shooter. Now, if you're in a lockdown situation, you have an active shooter in your building, as you're determining where you're going to hide, there are things in your classroom that you can use as tools. There's scissors, there's rulers, there's all types of things that you may be able to use if that shooter were to gain entry into your classroom, that you might be able to defend yourself, to give you seconds for yourself or students to escape. Because a lot of times seconds mean the matter of life or death. You want to barricade your doors in your classroom. If your doors lock, that's great. If they don't, we are going to do what we can to address those situations. But placing desks and obstacles against the door will buy you seconds. Statistics show that active shooters look for easy targets, soft targets. Having evolved scanners is a method to take your school from a soft target to a hardened target. Not like classroom with nothing up against the door, if it doesn't lock, is a soft target. Placing things and obstacles up against that door would give you seconds and make it more difficult for a shooter to come into your classroom, and that individual would move, more than likely, hopefully move on to another location. In an active shooter situation, all involved persons should quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect their own lives. Recommended action: run if there is an accessible escape path. Attempt to evacuate the premise. We mentioned this because, for example, if you were to look out of the door and see the active shooter, if you are in a multi-level building, head upstairs and you're down the hallway and you have a clear path to exit that building for yourself and for your students, it may make more sense to exit that building. I'm not telling you exactly what to do in any particular situation. I think I'd just like for you all to think about, if there is an active shooter situation, your instincts are going to kick in, your fight or flight are going to kick in, and every one of you are in individual spaces within the school building. You're going to have to make decisions based on what you think is the right thing to do at that moment in time. Your situation will be different than someone's around the corner or someone on another floor. Everybody's situation is going to be different based on where you are in the physical space and where that active shooter is. And active shooters usually move around, so an opportunity might present itself for you to vacate and evacuate. If you can do so, if you feel at that time you could do so and keep yourself and students safely, then once you leave the building, you should still seek shelter. The next option is to hide if evacuation is not possible. Find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you, within that classroom, within that restroom, within that auditorium, within that cafeteria, wherever you are. Find a spot where you feel you are less likely to be found. Make sure your cell phone ringers are off. A vibration could point to shooter in your direction if that shooter is in that classroom or wherever you are, and there's no other noise than just the mere vibration of your phone could identify you or your location. Definitely make sure your ringer is off. And as a last resort, fight as if your life is in imminent danger, because it would be at that time. Attempt to disrupt and or incapacitate the active shooter. And within a classroom, there are all types of things that you can use to do this. Scissors, even a book binder, rulers, place, just think in terms of what could I equip myself with in the event that that shooter were to come into my classroom. First of all, I'd like to say, when you're thinking of somewhere to hide, before you take off and hide, think of what you might be able to place behind that door to give you some time. If the active shooter is trying to get in and it's going to take he or she time to push what's against that door, away from that door to push through, they may decide to find another place to go. Our schools before Evolve were soft targets, and we are really aggressively working to have all of the schools equipped with the Evolve scanners, because that takes us from a soft target to a hardened target, and active shooters like soft targets. So it's just a layer, but it can be a life-saving layer. The run, hide, fight is taught by a lot of agencies, state police and other agencies are just want to offer this run as an option. If there is an accessible escape path, attempt to evacuate the premises if you feel you can safely do so for you and your students. If you commit to running, have an escape plan in mind. Leave your belongings. Help anyone who may be in need of assistance if possible. Once you commit to running for yourself and your students, evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Some people may not want to. Some people may feel, I'm safer here, I don't want to. You could not necessarily force them, but warn and prevent others from entering the area, because it's not safe. And if you're trying to leave the area, then you don't want anyone else to go into that area. If law enforcement is not on scene, call 911 as soon as you can safely do so. Hide. If safe evacuation is not possible, find a place to hide that provides cover and concealment. Lock the doors. If your door does not lock, place as many objects as safely and quickly as you possibly can behind the door in the inside of your classroom. Blockade the door with heavy furniture, totes, desks. This slide says shut off the lights. We're training not to shut off the lights and not to close blinds. It takes time to shut off lights. It takes time to close blinds. And if by chance there's maybe more than one shooter, usually there isn't, but if there is and someone's outside and see lights go off and blinds shut, then they know where your classroom is. So we are training in the Buffalo Public Schools to leave lights on and leave blinds up. Close, cover, move away from windows that give location to threat. Don't close windows, don't uncover windows, but certainly move away from windows that give location to threat. Silence your cell phones and remain quiet. Fight is used only as a last resort and only if in imminent danger. Attempt to disrupt or incapacitate the active shooter. Act as aggressively as possible. Draw items or use improvised weapons. Work together to incapacitate the shooter. Commit to your actions once you engage. Forethought and training are important to enable you to react appropriately if confronted with an active shooter situation. As these situations evolve quickly, you will need to decide rapidly what the safest course of action based on the scenario that is unfolding. As I stated before, there could be 10 people in the building, and all 10 of you, in the event of an active shooter, will be in different situations based on where you are, based on a lot of different factors. Information to provide. When possible, provide the following information to law enforcement officers or 911 operators. Location of active shooter, number of shooters, the physical description of shooters, the number and type of weapons held by the shooters. You might not be familiar with the type of weapons unless you're a hunter or you own firearms yourself, but just describing if you hear multiple shots, it's an indication that it's a semi-automatic or automatic weapon. If you hear one shot and then a few seconds and another shot, it could be a revolver, although most active shooters use automatic and semi-automatic weapons. And then relay to 911 the number of potential victims at the location, if you know that information. Prepare. Even the unknown or unexpected can be prepared for. This can include surveying your surroundings when you enter buildings and areas. Be mindful of every space you are in within the school. Take that outside of school buildings. As you know, we had that awful mass shooting in Tops Market. Anytime you go to any location, a restaurant, a movie theater, a shopping mall, anywhere, an event, you should always be mindful of your exit signs. How will I get out of this as quickly as I possibly can if an emergency happens? Whether it's an active shooter or not, if it's an emergency. So you should do this. Every classroom you go to, every room you're in, cafeteria, the restroom even. What would I do if an active shooter took place while I'm in this particular space? So you should constantly start mentally preparing for these things if you're not already doing so. Think about what you could do in an active shooter event or other emergency or disaster. Discuss plans with your family and coworkers. Recognizing indicators of potential violence and terrorism. In your workspace, school, house of worship, etc., find out your emergency plans for the building, including evacuation routes. Take into consideration what action is needed for individuals with functional needs and disabilities, guests and visitors, bilingual language needs, children, and the elderly. The method for reporting different types of emergencies, whether through alarms, text alerts, etc. If you see something, say something. Know the routines. Be alert and learn about your neighborhood and workplace. Understanding routines of places you spend time in will help you to identify things that are out of place. If you know, for example, I'm usually at this door in the morning when students arrive, they usually have their backpacks on them. However, I see that backpack over there. It's been there for most of the morning and it looks unfamiliar and no one has claimed it. That could be a suspicious backpack, it could be a suspicious package. You may need to call 911. Be aware of what's going on around you, whether you're traveling, at work, at school, or at home. Be on the lookout for suspicious activities. You should never leave a building or enter a building without looking around, just to be mindful of what's around the door, what's around the corner, if you could see around the corner of a building, whether it's daylight or at night. Take what you hear seriously. If you hear someone talk about plans to harm their community, report it to law enforcement immediately. If you see something, say something. Report any suspicious activity to the New York State Terrorism Tips Hotline at 1-866-SAFE-NYS. That's 1-866-723-3697. To report emergencies or crime in progress, dial 911. BPS School Safety and Security Reunification Process. Unified Command. I spoke about this under ICS 100. As an incident evolves, first responders typically establish their own incident command, and school or district officials will become part of a unified command, while the responding department or agency will assume primary incident command. Districts and schools remain responsible for reunifying students with their parents/guardians. Unified command should include all stakeholders in the incident. In the event of a critical incident on a school campus, Unified Command will include police, fire, medical, school administration, emergency management, etc. Reunification stations. Team staging. Check-in process for all district personnel in order to deploy resources where needed most. Parent parking. Parent check-in. That's the first contact with parents as they arrive at reunification. Greeters will meet with parents and staff, will check them in by completing a form or electronic sign-in. Student assembly/staging. That's the area where students and staff will wait. Parent waiting area. Parent/student reunification. Separate areas where students and parents will be brought in to reunify and complete checkout process. Victim assistant group. Mental health counselors and victim advocates will begin the recovery process and make parent notifications. Missing persons liaison. School liaisons to work with investigators in identifying, locate students that have self-evacuated, been transported to hospitals, or victims still in the school. The reunification kit includes signage, signboards, traffic cones, check-in forms, tablets, lanyards with assignment cards, checklists for coordinators, caution tape, pens, clipboards, tissues, paper, coloring books, markers, colored pencils, movies for the children, students. For the full information on the reunification process, please refer to the active shooter training course from April of 2023 that was previously presented. Active shooter incident, the recovery phase. In this dynamic threat environment that we currently live in, It is important that schools not only prepare their staff to respond to a potential incident, but also collectively determine the processes through which the organization and its staff recover from an incident. Recovery is a continuous process that occurs over short and long-term incremental phases. Schools and their staff will progress through the recovery phase at a different rate, and each will require varying degrees of assistance. Active shooter recovery phase. Short-term recovery. Short-term recovery address immediate needs. The short-term recovery process begins immediately after an active shooter incident concludes. Its goal is to reestablish safety and mitigate the physical, psychological, and emotional impacts from the incident. BPS Security will work closely with BPD and other emergency responders utilizing the Incident Command System to accomplish this goal. BPS Security will closely work with Dr. Brown and the Student Support Services team regarding further training relative to the short-term recovery phase. Ensuring life safety after the immediate rescue. Each active shooter incident has its own unique characteristics that will affect every stage of response and recovery, beginning with the short-term recovery process. The safety of victims and others immediately affected by the incident are of paramount and immediate importance. Short-term recovery. Coordinate medical assistance. These responsibilities typically fall under fire and EMS. However, as a Buffalo Public Schools employee, staff, or student might be able to direct fire and EMS in the direction of any injured individuals that you may be aware of that maybe they aren't. Set up crisis communication media response. This will fall under our Public Information Officer, Jeffrey Hammond, who would be working with the other various public information individuals from other agencies, law enforcement, city officials. Provide immediate crisis support. This would be done through Student Support Services. Assist the family reunification process. School administration and their staff are primarily responsible for reunification. Active shooter recovery phase, long-term recovery, restoration. The long-term recovery process begins once the assembly areas are cleared by law enforcement for cleaning and the affected individuals have returned to their families and friends. Long-term recovery is marked by the 1-year anniversary and beyond. Although the physical and emotional impact of an active shooter incident can linger for decades and sometimes an entire lifetime. According to the report from Homeland Security, mass shootings represent the greatest risk of acute traumatic stress disorders among the affected compared against other types of critical incidents like natural disasters. The goals of long-term recovery are to help employees and students return to normality in their daily interactions and professional life, and to take whatever steps are necessary to return the school or building to normal operations. Long-term recovery restoration. Steps to get the process underway are listed below. Assist employees with an Employee Assistance Program, EAP. Facilitate application for workers' compensation or other types of financial assistance. federal, state, and local victim assistance programs are available to assist. Encourage employees/students to seek information about victim assistance programs from the local community, which can aid in their recovery. Grief counseling. The psychological impact of an active shooter or other violence incidents is different for each affected individual. Grief counseling is used for a spectrum of emotional crisis to include for those who were victims and others less directly affected who may still experience post-traumatic stress disorders or other anxieties. Offer mental health counseling. Reopening the facility and resuming operations would be orchestrated by Chief Operating Officer David Hills. Returning to the facility when it reopens. Anniversaries and memorials. Anticipate the impact of anniversaries and memorials. Anniversaries and memorial services of remembrance are held to help victims, their families, and friends continue to transition through their traumatic experience to recovery. Post-incident scams and fraud. The aftermath of some active shooter incidents has seen the formation of fraudulent charities and other scams that may re-victimize those affected and the general public who wish to contribute to a legitimate charity. Long-term recovery, restoration phase, civil and criminal judicial process. Some active shooter incidents may result in criminal or civil trials. BPS legal staff should be aware of potential liability issues. Prepare for possible judicial processes. Anticipate providing assistance in criminal or civil litigation. Making employees aware that they may be called as a witness in a judicial proceeding. Participation in a legal proceeding may bring back traumatic memories of the incident. Consider providing grief counseling. Offer mental health counseling. An important component of recovery is to treat the emotional side effects of an incident's violence and stress. If possible, ensure that counselors are available immediately after an incident to evaluate and treat affected individuals. The goal is to get people affected by the incident to a baseline emotional well-being as quickly as possible. The length of treatment will depend on the needs of the individual and be determined by a professional mental health counselor.
Buffalo Public Schools Safety and Security Department policies and procedures regarding emergencies. Call 911 from a school landline phone for all emergencies and threats. Problems with the Evolve scanners? Call Bill Knapp at 716-279-8650. For operations, call BPS Security Executive Director Fred Wagstaff 716-818-5995 or Chief Barbara Lark at 716-954-6684. Evolve scanners are to be utilized daily for school arrivals. This also includes exam days, school events, and activities, if there is adequate security staffing. If you have a question, concern, or request for security, call Executive Director Fred Wagstaff. All Buffalo Public Schools students are to be wand and scanned upon entry into all Buffalo Public Schools No student is above being scanned and wand, no matter what the student's reputation is. The student who you never have an issue with could be the student that has been compromised by another student and could be transporting something into the school for that student. Only security officers are permitted to wand students and visitors. No school personnel are to wand. Use the request for security form when requesting BPS security for events at your school. If you have a question, concern, or a request pertaining to BPS security, please call Executive Director Fred Wagstaff or Chief Barbara Lark.